Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Rob Silverman. I'm here to talk about health and immunity and natural perspective for a novel time. I'm very excited about this presentation. Clearly, immunity has taken the world, no pun intended, by storm, and a lot of the immunity has been brought to the consciousness of the population because of clearly COVID-19. What we found is that we have to have a discussion as practitioners about how our immune system works and why, in many instances, has our immune system worked aberrantly. What conditions put a strain on our immune system, and what conditions make us more susceptible to bad health or failing health when we're attacked by a pathogen. And in addition, I think we should really cover, and I will cover, how viruses are a pathogen and how they affect your immune system. But my ultimate goal is really to talk about a natural perspective for a novel time. I believe that 2.0 is in functional medicine, functional nutrition, to talk about lifestyle, because I think this is a strongly lifestyle-y conditional issue, and to talk about our immune system, because I think, once again, we've taken our immune system for granted. Having said all that, let's proceed on health and immunity and natural perspective for a novel time. I always like to start off with a quote, and one of my favorite quotes speaking about COVID-19 is, you can't control the virus, but you can control the host. And the bottom line is, you want to make the host inhospitable. That host, by being inhospitable, doesn't mean unhealthy. You want that host to be healthy. You want your barriers up. You want your immune system functioning. You want to keep your comorbidities down. And what you really want to do is have your body to have the ability to optimize, to manage and modulate inflammation. What we're seeing right now is that the people who can't manage and modulate the inflammation are getting the bad outcomes from when pathogens attack, i.e. viruses. So some factors that make us more likely to contract COVID-19, or if you will, the comorbidities. Number one, cardiovascular disease. Number two, diabetes, prediabetes, blood sugar. For me, insulin resistance as a blood marker is a tremendously evocative number. It's a great test to take to really see where patients are, where their inflammatory status is. Obesity. And we're really going to highlight not just obesity, but we're going to talk about visceral fat, hypertension, and I'm going to skip down for a moment, autoimmune conditions. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because I do classify autoimmune with the other: hypertension, obesity, diabetes, and CVD. These are 5 things that we should be able to change regularly for a better outcome with lifestyle. Now, age, we're talking about age because of something called immunosenescence, which we're going to get to, where our immune cells begin to degenerate as we age. But there's a chronological and a biological age based on our health factors. We also have pulmonary disease, liver and kidney disease, and chronic neurological disease. But these neurological diseases, interestingly enough, most of them are in the brain, many of them. And many of these comorbidities, as you'll see by the end of this talk, come from the fact that we have increased intestinal permeability. This graph really speaks to the idea of age groups and why people went to the hospital. 2 big age groups, 18 to 49 and 50 to 64. So couple them together, obviously 18 to 64. The number one reason that adults were hospitalized from 64 and under was obesity. 65 and over, it was hypertension. Ultimately, because such a vast number of over 65-year-olds were hospitalized, hypertension was number 1, but obesity was a very close number 2. So let's speak to the idea of obesity. Obesity is linked to severe coronavirus, especially, believe it or not, for younger patients. Obesity is an important predictor of severe coronavirus illness in the US. Number 1 highest obesity rates in the world. Younger adults are particularly risk. Now, you shouldn't be born obese. You may have the gene to be obese, but genes are not your destiny. They load the gun, as we've always said. They don't fire that gun. Lifestyle, environment, that's what fires the gun. So let's get into that obesity linked to severe coronavirus, especially for the younger patients. They may have already had compromised respiratory functions prior to the infection. Abdominal obesity, which is more prominent in men or non-pregnant men, not trying to be funny, can cause compression of the diaphragm, the lungs, and chest capacity. Chronic low-grade inflammation and an increase in circulating pro-inflammatory cytokines, which we will detail and delineate as we go on, play the worst role in COVID-19 outcomes. Bottom line is, fat cells are depositories for toxins. These toxins come out and they are inflammatory. Most people don't realize if your body composition, especially once again your visceral fat, is high, you are inflamed. Maybe one of my favorite slides. This just recently came out. This study spoke to the idea of obesity in COVID-19, the role of visceral adipose tissue. There were 30 patients that were positive for COVID-19. They had an increase in visceral fat by 1 square decimeter. It's not a large amount. That was associated with a 22.53-fold increase for risk of going into the ICU. In addition, a 16.11-fold increase of using and needing a mechanical ventilation. When you compare and contrast with just an upper abdominal circumference weight, an additional centimeter, which for us in America is less than a half inch, was 1.13 and 1.25 respectively for ICU and mechanical ventilation. However, no increased risks with subcutaneous fat or BMI. So for me, when you see that visceral fat, the visceral fat is what lays over the viscera. It can innervate and infiltrate all the different organs. That's highly inflammatory. The subcutaneous fat, which is pinch and inch, is not as inflammatory. BMI is really not a marker that most functional medicine nutritionists like because it's just height over weight. Another aside, subcutaneous fat, 80% is running around the block, exercise. 20% is attributed to diet. Conversely, when you speak of visceral fat, 80% is to diet and 20% is to exercise. So as you can see, it takes a while to remove someone's visceral fat. Are these preventable lifestyle diseases? Underlying chronic illness, 42% of Americans are obese, 75% are overweight, 6 out of 10 have one chronic illness, 4 out of 10 have more than one chronic illness, and we see that obesity increases the risk of death 3 times. Everything we mentioned leads to the concept of increased inflammation. In addition, we're looking at belly fat. And older metabolically challenged people, 65 or older, about half people over 65 are challenged because they typically are pre-diabetic or diabetic. The older you are, we all spoke about it before, decreases your immune function. This is a striking statistic. 12% of the American population is metabolically healthy. That's 1 in 7.5 people. So in my office, it's 1 in 8 essentially walking in that's metabolically healthy. And as a chiropractor who does a lot of functional medicine, nutrition, if you will, imagine just a chiropractic, a naturopathic, a medical patient walking in and with a condition and not understanding the whole system approach that we recommend in functional medicine. Now, long-term exposure to air pollution increased the incidence of COVID-19 mortality in the US. Persons living for decades in a country with high levels of particle matter were 15% more likely to die from coronavirus. Many of these particle matters come from fuel combustion and tobacco smoke. The data was compiled over 17 years and for more than 3,000 countries. Smell and taste, strong association with COVID-19. Without question, it should be included in this screening measure. So if you've lost smell and taste, you're 10 times more likely to have COVID-19. Some of the good parts to that is the recovery is quite high. You'll probably return getting your smell and taste in 2 to 4 weeks. The loss of smell and taste really imply, because they are cranial nerves, that COVID-19 also damages the central nervous system. Why does SARS-CoV-2 spread so easily? So many people have asked that, and I think a little explanation is warranted, certainly so we can share it with our patients. SARS-CoV and SARS-CoV-2 share 86% of the same genomic sequence. So specifically, a few genetic studies have investigated the microscopic structure of the virus, a key protein on its surface, and a receptor in human cells that may collectively explain why the virus can attack and spread so easily. The spike proteins, and that's the thing that really exemplifies coronavirus. They call it corona because it's a crown. Spike proteins are what the coronavirus used to bind to the membrane of the human cells that they infect. The binding process is activated by certain cell enzymes. Interestingly enough, those enzymes we're going to talk about in a minute. However, those spikes allow the structure to bind to be at least 10 times more tightly bound than corresponding spike proteins of previous SARS. The presence of the enzymes of furin enzymes on all cell surfaces cleaves and activates the SARS-CoV-2 into a wide range of tissues and organs all at once. This activated unleashes the NLRP3 inflammasome, initiating a flurry of immune reactions that can result in what we call cytokine storms. So the tropism of the coronavirus is to dive to the fluorine cleavage site in the spike protein, SARS-CoV-2. It is quite present, but this is not present in SARS-CoV-1. So the presence of furines on almost all the cell surfaces allow a dramatically increased ability to fuse to host cells. So the key takeaway is that receptor sites, the ACE2, the spike gets into the ACE2, stimulates the furin enzymes, and ultimately stimulates what we call 3CL protease. That's once they've entered human cells, coronaviruses produce damage and spread to other cells by creating an enzyme, which we just called 3CL protease. Although several enzymes may be involved in viral replication and spread, a 3CL protease is the most important for the coronavirus. The ACE2 is the host receptor responsible for mediating infection. The SARS-CoV-2 is what infects alveolar epithelial cells through the ACE2 receptor. We've talked about this a lot, and we've seen a lot in the news. The destruction of the epithelial cells and the increase of the cell permeability lead to the release of the virus. The SARS-CoV-2 activates the innate immune system, macrophages, and other innate immune cells, not only to capture the virus, but also to release a large number of cytokines and chemokines. The adaptive immunity is typically activated, and I will go into a lot of detail about this, by the antigen-presenting cells, which are basically dendrites. Ultimately, the takeaway here is that the virus doesn't kill the humans or damage the humans. It's the body's inflammatory response that does that. ACE2, gut microbiota, and cardiovascular, all of them have a lot of ACE2 receptor sites. ACE2 is also expressed in the human heart. What's most interesting and was hard to illuminate the human heart, we thought it was the muscle. It was actually not the muscle. It was actually the capillary epithelial cells that were dysfunctional, the periocytes. So if infected by the virus, these patients had a higher risk of heart attack. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, clearly a carbohydrate problem, clearly a lifestyle issue. 202 patients were studied with positive COVID-19. 50% of them admitted to the hospital had liver injury. 75.2%, it went from 50 to 75.2% during hospitalization. Another 25% had a liver problem. Why? There's an abundant amount of ACE2 receptors, not only in the small intestine, but also on the liver. And the liver, without question, contains the largest amount of macrophages in the body, which is implicitly speaking to the innate immune system. There is a tremendous gut to liver axis, which we'll talk about, and obesity without question is implicated. Let's talk about our immune system. There's actually 3 layers to the immune system. Number 1, barriers. It prevents entry. That's why so many people have decided and said to talk about a mask, because it's oral, nasal, pharynx. It's a barrier, it's a protection. Other barriers are the skin and mucous membrane, stomach acids, digestive enzymes, and of course, beneficial bacteria in your gut. Then you have what we call your innate immune system. So there's 2 arms. Understand that your immune system is somewhat simplistic in that it ascertains if something comes in, if it is self or foreign. If it's perceived as self, there's no response. If it's perceived as foreign, a pathogen, an antigen, the first arm is innate immunity. It's a general defense. It's your search and destroy people. Neutrophils, macrophages, they destroy foreign invaders and damage cells. Your innate immune system was given to you when mankind started. You then have an acquired immunity. The thought is acquired, or your adaptive immunity, because it can adapt, started about 10,000 years ago. There you'll recognize and memorize. They are B and T cells, and your T cells are your search and destroy, your recognize, if you will. And your B cells are your memorize, or antibodies, your IgM, your IgG, and your secretory IgA, etc. And the problem with the COVID-19, because it's a novel virus, we don't have any acquired immunity. So those who have issues, i.e. comorbidities, pose a greater threat to health decline. So just remember, your immune system is a critical element, and it is without question being judged today and every day. So here we have humoral and cell-mediated branches of the immune system. So your humoral is your B cells. So ultimately, it's your antibodies that are being produced. And your cell is your T cells. Your T cells are made from your thymus. Your B cells are made from your bone. So your T cells, like we said, are that recognize and should kill an infected cell, whereas your B cells, your humoral, are memorizing what's going on to make an antibody. So this does not happen again. Certain terms that are very popular now. Immune support. Immune support. You want things that are immune supporting. Support your immune system. Balance. Immunobalance. Balancing the arms of your immune system. Immune boosting. Little concerned about that term. Immune boosting, you may boost a certain arm of your immune system, and that may cause an imbalance in your immune function, and that could be very deleterious. Immunosenescence. Immunosenescence refers to the gradual deterioration of the immune system brought on by natural age advancements. The adaptive immune system is affected more than the innate immune system. Senolytics, senolytic cell death. Immunorejuvenation. Dr. Jeffrey Bland does a beautiful dissertation on immunorejuvenation. Your cells die, they get rejuvenated, and they're rejuvenated and stronger than they were before. Immunophenotyping, the basic idea is that it's a test that's used to identify cells on the different types of markers or antigens present on a cell surface, nucleus, or cytoplasm. The technology helps identify the lineage of cells using antibodies that detect markers or antigens on the cells before the immuno occurs. Immunophenotyping. And one that I didn't put there, immunoresilience. It's our body's ability to ward off pathogens and prevent us from getting infection when getting exposed to different microbes in our environment, whether it's bacteria or virus. And one that we should all consider, immunonutrition. It's a better use of immunonutrition would benefit the vulnerable groups during this pandemic. So how would you support your immune system? We kind of discussed the problem. I want to go through several layers. Here's a general or generic way to support your immune system. Avoid foods. I just had this conversation with 10 patients this morning. I was in for 3 hours. Avoid certain foods. GPS. No gluten, no processed food, no sugar. Take care of your DNA. No dairy, no nicotine, no artificial sweeteners. Follow an anti-inflammatory diet. Avoid fried foods. Avoid trans fats. Of course, what I mentioned before, the sugar is extremely detrimental to most people's health. Detect or avoid food sensitivities. There's never been a better time to detect food sensitivities than now, because what will food sensitivities do? Raise your inflammatory status. So diet for immune resilience. So I'm a big proponent of a good diet. Proper diet enhances immunity versus a poor diet, which impairs immunity. Make your immune system or support it, balance it. Don't necessarily boost it. Make eating a priority. Clean eating, wild smash fish, salmon, mackerel, anchovy, sardines, herring, plant-based diet, fruits and greens, grass-fed meats, high fiber, nuts and seeds, chicken soup, everybody's ethnic penicillin. Snack, nothing wrong with organic dark chocolate. Add specific herbs like ginger and turmeric. Bone broth, what a beautiful choice. Put your foods in a bone broth. Drink bone broth. Bone broth is a choice for me after exercise. Hydration, appropriate fluid intake, half your body weight in ounces and add 8 ounces for every 15 minutes that you exercise. Organic coffee and tea. Number one drunk beverage in America is coffee. The average American consumes 3.2 cups of coffee. Imagine coffee being the third most sprayed item after tobacco and cotton. Just switching from regular to organic coffee, look at all the toxins that you remove. Oils, extra virgin olive oil, avocado, macadamia nut, mushrooms, shiitake, turkey tail, maitake, oyster. Include nuts, avocado, olive oils in your diet. You'll get oleic acid from these foods. They stimulate the SIRT1 pathway, which is your key defense enzyme. And consider your supporting your immune system by what we call time restrictive eating or intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting really refers to the idea of fasting for a day. So we use it incorrectly in the parlance. Consider a time restrictive eating. What we say, fast for 12 to 16 hours a day. So let's take 16. If you go 16 and 8, those are the numbers that you've used. 16 is the fast, 8 is the window in which to eat. The literature is robust. Why does it work? Well, it's getting your body to switch from glucose metabolism to ketone metabolism. Ketone bodies regulate the expression and activity of many proteins and molecules that are known to influence health and aging. In addition, fasting or time restrictive eating causes autophagy, self-devouring. The breakdown and eating of old cells, using the energy to make new cells, really sprouting the idea of immunorejuvenation. Get ample sleep, 7 to 8 good quality hours. Sleep is critical because your immune system resets. Get a home exercise plan or get out and exercise. Humidity, believe it or not, humidity is key. What they call key humidity or standard humidity or relative humidity is 50% in the home. The impact of nutrition on COVID-19 and susceptibility and long-term consequences. This was in April of 2020. High rate of consumption of diets consisting of high saturated fats, sugar, and refined carbs. They called that the Western diet instead of the standard American diet. That led to an increase in obesity and type 2 diabetes. The Western diet consumption activated the innate immune system. However, after upregulating the innate immune system, it impaired the adaptive immunity, which led to chronic inflammation and impaired host defenses versus viruses. So saturated fats actually lead to the chronic activation of an innate immune system and the inhibition of your adaptive immune system. There's a spelling error there. So sorry, I'll correct that when we send these out. So excessive short-chain fatty acids induce a lipotoxic state, activating that innate immune system via, please recall this, toll-like receptor 4. So this bad diet ultimately inhibits B and T cells, induces B cell apoptosis. So you have no antibodies, leading to B cell immunodepression. Interesting. How many people have gone through now being positive for COVID-19 as an example, but not producing antibodies? What was their diet? So an innate or an increased innate and decreased adaptive leads to chronic inflammation and impaired defense against viral pathogens. That increased peripheral inflammation leads to increased neurodegenerative disease, which is typically complicated by an unhealthy diet. I had a patient today come in with a neurodegenerative disease, and he had been to several what he called functional medicine doctors. Today, I told him for the first time he's heard in his 64 years, no dairy, no gluten, and no sugar. He actually asked me if I was crazy. The point being, you got to change the diet to decrease the inflammation. The conclusion is critical to consider lifestyle habits in people who are susceptible to COVID-19 and recovery. And the authors, who were medical doctors, recommended individuals refrain from a poor diet and consume high amounts of nutrients to boost immune function. Many articles which came out in April spoke about nutrition being a comorbidity towards bad outcomes. So again, let's take it to the next step. Let's talk about immune supporting supplements. Here are some of the nutrients: vitamin C, zinc citrate, mixed mushroom complex, vitamin D3, probiotics, NAC, beta-glucans, omega-3 fatty acids, elderberry, and vitamin A. New York City hospitals actually, and as you guys all know, I am from New York. I'm right in Westchester County. I'm 20 minutes outside the city. I'm 2 miles from the epicenter. I had given a webinar and some of the doctors had heard it, and they are now in IV injecting 1,500 milligrams of vitamin C 3 to 4 times a day. And the takeaway was the patients who received vitamin D did significantly better than those who did not get vitamin C. It helps a tremendous amount, but it's not highlighted because it's not a sexy drug. Here you're seeing the positive effects of vitamin D against respiratory viruses, rhinovirus, RSV, and influenza viruses. Vitamin D supplementation has shown to prevent acute respiratory tract infections. Not only that, vitamin D supplementation was safe and protected against these respiratory tract infections overall. They found patients who were deficient in vitamin D also experienced the greatest benefit when you supplemented with vitamin D. Now, there are two main sources to get enough vitamin D: the exposure to sunlight, foods, or food supplementation. Vitamin D and its receptor, vitamin D receptor, regulate the gut microbiome, maintaining barrier functions and inhibit inflammation in the intestines. These bidirectional host microbiome interactions seem related to the vitamin D/VDR in intestine, also impacts lung, liver, and other organs. Vitamin D should be called hormone D. It puts the brakes on inflammation and balances, if you will, both arms. This was the first data published on vitamin D severity and vitamin D levels. Go all the way to the right and look at the green. And in the green, what you're going to see is over 30, these are American numbers, 30 NGs, mLs. Interestingly enough, which is not a high number as far as I'm concerned. 40 to 60 was really implicated in being good. I like 60 to 80. Over 30 showed the severity dropped precipitously if the vitamin D levels were on the way up. So here we have the influence of the microbiota viral. So here we see that the microbiota of the host activates the inflammasome by priming signal interleukin-1 beta and interleukin-18. The secretion of these cytokines induces migration of dendrite cells from the lung to the draining lymph node where they prime T cells. The downstream effect of T cell priming is protective of the host against influenza-induced pathology. Your indirect promotion, in this case, the microbiota of the host stimulates the proliferation of lymphoid cells that are targeted by the virus. And the direct promotion, microbial ligands such as LPS, are utilized by viruses to enhance their attachment to target cells or to counteract the antivirus immune response by targeting, as we said before, toll-like receptor 4, which leads to the release of multiple interleukins. Once again, probiotics are a critical element to keep your microbiota balanced. Probiotics, 12-week study. Participants had contracted a cold 4 times in the past year. The conclusion was the consumption of probiotics significantly reduced incidence of upper respiratory infection and flu-like symptoms. Glutathione, the master antioxidant. One molecule of vitamin C ameliorates several free radicals, and vitamin C is critical. It is on my protocol. Vitamin E, another great choice, great for cell membrane health, can ameliorate 3 to 5. Glutathione, master antioxidant, can ameliorate 1,000,000 free radicals. Making glutathione, whether you take it straight or using NAC to make it, is a critical element also because people who are deficient in glutathione have a higher tendency for tight junction damage. So the conclusion here was oral and IV glutathione and the precursors and alpha-lipoic acid, all which are detailed in my protocol, may represent treatment approach for blocking NF-kappa B and addressing the cytokine storm syndrome and respiratory distress in patients with COVID-19 pneumonia. Elderberry, this poor herb which has been beaten up so many different times. Elderberry contains several functional bioactive compounds like flavonoids and phenolea compounds or acids, which are potent modulators of inflammation. They shown to reduce production of interleukin-16, 6, TNF, and reactive oxygen species. Here is a great, I was able to pull this. Basically, we're seeing that elderberry inhibits infectious bronchitis virus in an early point during replication. The green arrow really depicts you'll want to take it a day before. So it's something that you would take, like I'm taking now, for prevention as opposed to at the time of illness. So elderberry is a great choice to hold off viral compromise. So now let's take a look at the immune support supplements. Now, clearly these are DaVinci's supplements. This is a DaVinci Immune Support Supplement Protocol. Let's take a look at what we offer. Number one, liposomal vitamin C, 2 teaspoons. Well, one, what do you want vitamin C for? Well, we all know it helps maintain collagen. It helps the body form red blood cells. It provides antioxidant protection against free radicals, supports the immune system, and actually is good for gum and gut tissue health. Vitamin C, as you know, is an essential water-soluble nutrient that acts as an antioxidant by protecting the body from oxidative stress. Liposomal, it is a nanotechnology, an encapsulation of ingredients that represents a new delivery system that offers important advantages over existing methods of delivery. The liposome has a hydrophilic sides offering a fat and a water portion, which allows vitamin C to be absorbed through the fat and water-soluble pathways for optimal utilization by the body. It's excellent for people with gastric issues. In addition, zinc. You've seen a lot of zinc. So here's a zinc lounge. Zinc is an essential mineral found in every body cell. It's essential for a wide range of physiological functions and is an important cofactor for more than 200 to 300 enzymes, which only other mineral you may be able to say that for is magnesium. It's really been shown to improve immune health, especially what they call in the wintertime, and it's great for joint and skin. It also supports the immune health and function, collagen formation, bone health, and muscle function. And some other secondary functions are normal cell division, brain development, and nerve function, and enzyme and hormone synthesis and function. So let's look at vitamin D. What we talk about D3, or do we really have to talk anymore? Hormone 3. Vitamin D puts the brakes on the inflammatory cascade, and it balances the innate and the adaptive immune systems. Acute immune benefits, it's a liquid, so it's 1 milliliter 4 times daily. So this is recommended for those who have serious immune support, looking for the activity of the macrophages and the killer T cells. It also helps support the release of interleukins and cytokines, which activate immune cells. What are in the nutrients? What's in the formula? Well, maitake mushrooms, beta-glucans, D-fraction, which has been a research and highly concentrated source of beta-1,6-glucans, which the reason you take that form has a higher ability to support macrophages, T cells, and also supports the release of interleukins and cytokines to activate immune cells and support the immune system. In addition, there's DMG. So here is an immune liquid formula really to bolster one's immune system. Mega probiotic ND. As everybody knows, I'm big on the gut. I'm robust on the gut. It contains 9 species of microorganisms from non-dairy sources: Lactobacillus, Lactobacillus acidophilus, L. raminosus, L. casei, L. salivarius. In addition, Bifidobacterium, Brevum, Longum, Bifidum, and Streptococcus thermophilus. It also has a prebiotic called FOS. You cannot give probiotics without also feeding them with a good prebiotic. I had alluded to before NAC, and here it is. NAC is a non-essential free-form amino acid that is highly stable form of cysteine. It is critical for the production of glutathione, the master antioxidant produced in the body. NAC on its own has a plethora of literature to help support healthy lung tissue and the body's natural defenses, including cell health, ultimately helps to break down the mucus in the respiratory tract and helps with rebuilding of lung tissue and the support of immune cells to support immunity. And last but not least, immuno-DMG chewable. There's you getting your elderberry, your maitake mushrooms, your vitamin C, E, and D, and astragalus. So one thing I wanted to talk about is viral and cellular membrane. Any virus must enter a human cell, replicate and damage the cell, escaping to affect adjacent cells. For viruses, there are three enzymes that play a critical role in this sequence, as we talked about, ACE2, furin, and 3CL-Pro. They all are ultimately going to lead to NLRP3 inflammasome, which has been implicated so strongly with COVID-19. Now, interesting, this was one of the newer things, the viral porins that activates, that can be clustered into three main groups that have been linked to the activation of the NLRP3 inflammasomes. The first group of viral porins pumps proteins and dissipates protein gradient across trans-Golgi network, something like influenza A virus. The second group manipulates calcium homeostasis, actually stimulating calcium from intracellular storages to the cytokine, providing the second signal for the NLRP3 activation and the release of interleukin beta, such as in the rhinovirus. And the third group increases the mitochondrial stress and affects ROS production, like in the coronavirus. Bottom line is, we don't want to stimulate this NLRP3 inflammasome. Ultimately, cytokines, they're a double-edged sword exploited by the coronavirus. So the imagery of the cytokine storm, here's my imagery. The bottom line is, think of an empty cup of water. You have no inflammation. You're not heavy. You have no comorbidities. Think of you being heavy, having comorbidities, having leaky gut. Water's to the top of your mug or cup. And then you pour some water in and it just flows over and there's water all over the place like a storm. So a lot of this cytokine storm is the expression of inflammation in already inflamed people. In addition to the cytokine storm, it's just constant attack by those cytokines, those interleukins. Most patients with severe COVID-19 exhibit substantially elevated serum levels of pro-inflammatory cytokines, including interleukin 6, 8, as well as interleukin 2, 17, and TNF, which is all characterized as the cytokine storm. In addition, C-reactive protein and D-dimer are found to be abnormally high. High levels of pro-inflammatory cytokines may lead to shock and tissue damage to heart, liver, and kidneys, as well as respiratory damage or multiple organ function. They also mediate extensive pulmonary pathology, which we've seen a lot in the literature, leading to a massive infiltration of neutrophils and macrophages, diffuse alveolar damage, and thickening of the alveolar wall. So once again, we want to decrease the imagery, if you will, of the cytokine storm. We need inflammation. We just don't need excessive inflammation. And here you're looking at the mediators of the cytokine storm and the phenotypes. I think we've implicated them a lot. They can damage, when released in abundance, endothelial dysfunction, inflammatory response, and pulmonary fibrosis. ARDS and ALI, acute respiratory distress syndrome, and acute lung injury. They're both dependent upon the activation of an inflammasome from the cytokine storm and the release of the NLRP3 inflammasome, ultimately coming from your innate immune system, releasing the interleukins 1 beta and interleukin 18. Here we're seeing the activation of the NLRP3 inflammasome, toll-like receptor 4. And by the way, there's a toll-like receptor 4 in the gut that is stimulated when you have leaky gut, ultimately stimulating the signal transducer pathway of NF-kappa B. NF-kappa B ultimately will release interleukin 1 beta combined with the inflammasome, NLRP3, ultimately releases interleukin 18, and you also get fatigue and damage to the mitochondria. So what nutrients do I like to manage and modulate the NLRP3 inflammasome? EGCG, green tea, quercetin, resveratrol, curcumin, ginger, boswellia, aloe vera, sulforaphane, omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D, melatonin, and alpha-lipoic acid. So here is DaVinci's NLRP3 inflammasome protocol. Let's start with green tea 70. The next slide will without question be the takeaway slide for green tea. 4 cups of green tea are going to do it, or 1 cap daily. Olive 15 is olive leaf extract, works directly against unwanted materials by stimulating your own protective cells to ingest them without suppressing your immune system or damaging the beneficial flora. 1 tablet twice a day. Curcumin C3 complex. Everybody knows what curcumin does. Curcumin will be detailed later. The bottom line to curcumin is that it shuts off the expression of NF-kappa B and upregulates the antioxidant pathway NRF2. Omega-3 fatty acids is a mixture of omega-3 and vitamin D. It's a superior quality formulation. The omega-3 fish oil in the product is from wild-caught anchovies, sardines, mackerel, and tuna. The oil is then molecularly distilled to ensure purity and stability. 2 soft gels daily. Phytobenefits, a hidden gem. The unique formula provides evidence-based extracts from the most powerful botanicals in natural medicine. This compilation formula covers concerns associated with supporting the healthy levels of oxidative stress, associated with supporting levels of detoxification, metabolic process, and of course, immune function. It has green tea. It's got ultimately making sulforaphane. It's got curcumin, quercetin, lycopene, and resveratrol. Melatonin, another sweet spot, if you will. So many people think that melatonin, liposomal melatonin, 2 sprays 3 times a day, they think melatonin is just for sleep. It is not. It actually has some tremendous functions: immunomodulation, regulation of circadian rhythms, sleep, of course, anti-excitatory actions, antioxidant actions, anti-inflammatory properties. Also, it's shown in literature to decrease acute lung oxidative injury, decrease pro-inflammatory cytokines, decrease inflammatory cell recruitments, and increase antioxidant protection. I'll have some more succeeding slides on melatonin. Resveratrol 50 is a protective compound produced by grape vines. Interesting. Resveratrol is an excellent combination with quercetin, should be typically in a 2-to-1 ratio. Resveratrol is a phytoestrogen. You will see how important those estrogens are, especially, believe it or not, for men. And alpha-lipoic acid is an antioxidant, works with the watery and the fat part of the cell, great for blood glucose, decreases the AMPK pathway. Here was that slide I was talking about. Molecular docking of 7 proteins, SARS-CoV-2 for green tea. 18 compounds, many of them were quality nutrients. EGCG, lead compound that actually bound the docks of ACE2 receptors better than drugs or other nutritional components. The conclusion was EGCG should be explored as a drug candidate for the treatment of COVID-19. Curcumin, suppression of the cytokine release in storm, as we said earlier, decreases the release of interleukins by NF-kappa B. Vitamin D deficiency contributed directly to acute respiratory disease syndrome, another reason to upregulate vitamin D. I'm a big proponent of about 5,000 IUs of D3 daily. Vitamin D has shown to inhibit NLRP3 because there's actually a receptor site there, so it allows for the NLRP3 inhibition. Here's a slide that really dictates the mechanism for innate and adaptive immune responses to vitamin D. Ultimately, it's the balance between the two that allows people's defense to function optimally. Here was an interesting one. This was in Nutrients 2020 in April. They really explained the idea of how vitamin D was great in reducing respiratory tract infections. It decreased viral replication rates. It decreased the concentration of cytokines. They gave the patients in the study 10,000 IUs of vitamin D for a few weeks, then dropped them down, titrated them down to 5,000. Their goal was to raise them to above 40 to 60 ng over mLs. The conclusion: that for treatment of COVID-19, higher vitamin D levels would be useful. Alpha-lipoic acid, we talked about it a little before, but however, here's some critical element. It enhances intracellular glutathione levels, and it was shown to attenuate the increased susceptibility to human coronavirus. Here's my slide on melatonin. This has been getting a lot of play. People were talking about it. It was printed again in March in Life Science, reprinted against in June. What it showed was melatonin blocked inflammation by blocking all these interleukins. In addition, melatonin was also able to block and ameliorate oxidative stress. And lastly, of course, it was positive not just for the cytokine storm, but positive for sleep. If you can sleep, you will recover. Your immune system will recover. So interleukin 6 is actually the bad person in all the interleukins. It's the overlooked interleukin. What we found out was interleukin 6 upregulated virulence and host genetic backgrounds. It was a potential factor to actually damage infected cells. It threw off the T1 to T2 balance. It also stopped and reduced apoptosis and cytolysis. Interleukin 6 is an important member of the cytokine network and typically plays a central role in acute inflammation. Interleukin is a multifactorial or multifunctional cytokine, which plays an important role in human metabolism, autoimmune cell differentiation, disease treatment, and so on and so forth. Interesting, not in this study, 9 severe COVID-19 patients. The symptoms were simply in order of fever, cough, dyspnea, fatigue. Fever is the #1 symptom. Interesting. Loss of or difficulty in breathing was a difference between mild and moderate to severe COVID-19. #1 comorbidity is hypertension. Interleukin 6, or an increase in interleukin 6, was seen with an increase in body temperature as well as an increase in C-reactive protein, LDH, and D-dimer. The conclusion was to be able to change interleukin 6, it'd be a great marker to help with people who have severe COVID-19. NRF2 inhibits interleukin 6 expression and alleviates inflammation. So we want things to upregulate the NRF2 pathway. And here they are: fish oils, which we talked about, caloric restriction, or if you will, time-restrictive eating, curcumin, green tea extract, milk thistle, alpha-lipoic acid, sulforaphane, ashwagandha root, and our good old organic coffee. So interesting, this kind of like really grabbed my attention because here we saw an association of blood glucose control and outcomes in patients with COVID-19 with pre-existing type 2. Bottom line, a tremendous change in outcomes in just dropping somebody's blood sugar 10 nm. The evidence that people with type 2 diabetes are at a greater risk of poor outcomes should they be infected with COVID-19. The true encouraging news, people with type 2 diabetes whose blood sugar is well controlled fared much better than those with poorly controlled blood sugar. That was, as you see, in Cell Metabolism, April 30th. Now, there's 500 million people that have type 2 diabetes. So imagine now, if we're doing any kind of immune risk assessment, immune screening, blood sugar would be a great starting point. To piggyback on that, diabetes and coronavirus risk. Coronavirus enters the body. Outcome: the total amount of viruses, how much the viruses replicate, how much replication occurs on lung tissue, and the amount of cytokines used for immune response. Individuals with diabetes or bad blood sugar, or blood sugar issues, if you will, have a delayed immune response. So let's talk about, we're getting into the differences between men and women. More men are getting COVID-19 than women. Why? Well, estrogenic compounds. Women obviously have more estrogen, estradiol. Estradiol allows for more robust immune response to viral challenges. Very fascinating. Estrogenic compounds are found to reduce influenza. Here are some more differences between the two. The majority of the male patients with COVID-19 had low testosterone. So again, we're reiterating comorbidities, lifestyle, healthy patients, all in our armamentarium of functional medicine. Male patients who were tested positive for COVID-19, almost 70 had low testosterone. Female patients had elevated T without alterations in dihydrotestosterone levels. The male patients had with testosterone negatively correlated a low testosterone with inflammatory interleukin 2 and IFN. whereas the estradiol levels positively correlated with inflammatory interleukin-6. Female patients, testosterone levels positively correlated with inflammatory cytokines, i.e. interleukin-6. So some of the takeaways here is simple. Critically ill male patients suffer from severe testosterone deficiencies. Both of the androgens in the slide above are required to mount antiviral immune responses to combat infections in males. Men versus women. Not that it's men versus women, just men versus women in this study. They used a swab test they had, which will determine negative or positive COVID-19. 68 subjects, median age 37 years, 48 males, 20 females. Females were able to achieve viral clearance significantly earlier than males. Family members studied. ACE2 and specific repositories were considered. The testes, one of the highest sites of ACE2 expression, high ACE2 expression in testes suggest an existence of gender-specific viral reservoirs. So you're really going to see it more common, once again, in men than in women due to some structural differences and due to some hormonal differences. Well, I've told everybody, obviously the droplets, the airway respiratory droplets, are the most common way to spread this virus. Well, we forget about spreading things fecal and orally. Without question, researchers found that the RNA and proteins from SARS-CoV-2 are shed in the feces in infection and persist after respiratory systems abate. The bottom line here, it's very simple. You shed, your median symptoms start at 5.1 days. You can shed the virus through the fecal process for the first 5 days and 28 days after the abatement of fever. There's an abundance of ACE2 receptors on the lung as well as the ileum and the colon. 54.3% of patients had SARS-CoV RNA in the stool. 23% of patients tested positive in stool despite testing negative for the virus in the respiratory samples. So there's a small but growing body of evidence that indicates digestive systems may serve as an alternate route of the SARS-CoV infection. In addition to the respiratory tract, they stressed adding that clinicians should be careful to promptly identify patients with initial GI symptoms. As everybody knows, this is one of my favorite slides. It's my Dr. Rob's gut matrix. Talk all about the gut. 80% of our immune cells are in our gut. It's where our macro and micronutrients are absorbed. And it makes a lot of sense. Why? I asked somebody once, why is all the bulk of our immune system in our gut? Because the bulk of our pathogens are coming from the foods that we consume, even if it's good foods. And that really resonated with me. So our gut is made up of, obviously, of our small and large intestine. The small intestine is a true misnomer. It's about 90% of the length. The reason they call it small, it's only 1 diameter in width, whereas the large intestine is 2.5 inches in diameter. The small intestine's thickness is one single epithelial layer that has the thickness of a wet paper towel, whereas it's a triple layer of thickness in the large intestine. As an FYI, the blood-brain barrier is made up of the same proteins and the same thickness as the gut barrier. Now, we can have what we call leaky gut. We can have leaky gut from a few different things. Number one, leaky gut can be attributed to something called dysbiosis, the unleveling of good and bad bacteria. You need about 85% good bacteria to bad bacteria. That's why I recommend over 50 billion colony-forming units. So dysbiosis is one leading factor to getting to what we call leaky gut. Another one would be tight junction damage. They're like gates, they open up. I call them loose junctions. What does this all mean? Well, the sole purpose of our small intestine is to allow for digested food particles, vitamins, and water or nutrients in water to be absorbed through its epithelial cell and go to the bloodstream. When it becomes too permeable or increased intestinal permeability, i.e. leaky gut syndrome, specific objects like undigested food particles, bacteria, pathogens, and viruses pass the gut and go into the bloodstream. When they go into the bloodstream, your immune system recognizes them as an antigen and attacks them. And you now have an antigen antibody attack, you have localized inflammation, ultimately flows through the body, you'll have systemic inflammation leading to possible autoimmunity. You can also have food sensitivities. Leaky gut can lead to food sensitivities. Food sensitivities can lead to leaky gut. The release of yeast and fungus. One of the things that are implicated in leaky gut is LPS, lipopolysaccharide. It is an endotoxin that holds the gram-negative bacteria on the inside of the intestinal wall, even though it's on the outside of the intestinal wall. When LPS is expressed, LPS starts an inflammatory cascade and damages a cornucopia of unfortunate organs that can be damaged because of this expression. LPS, the expression of LPS, 3 times the incidence of heart disease. LPS is very, very inflammatory once expressed. 75% of the toxins that pass the gut, that go in the bloodstream, get to the liver. That causes a toxic chemical overload. 25% of the toxins from the gut to the liver are go through the portal vein. As we saw before, gut to liver and liver to gut, tremendously implicated together. You really can't fix the gut without fixing the liver. I happen to think to fix them simultaneously. So leaky gut, liver dysfunction. Leaky gut, increased blood sugar problems, insulin resistance, prediabetes, diabetes. Leaky gut, higher incidence of obesity, decrease in quality body composition. Leaky gut, higher incidence of autoimmunity. There's your thyroid. Leaky gut, leaky heart, we talked about. And for the musculoskeletal people out there, leaky gut, higher incidence of musculoskeletal system. The gut leaks and cytokines are released. You have an increase in arthritis and joint pain. You also have a release of MMPs, matrix metalloproteinases. They damage soft tissue like fibrocartilage, like discs and rotator cuff. Leaky gut, leaky brain. Gut on fire, brain on fire. Bidirectional communication. No surprise that you lose your sense of smell and taste and you have damage to your gut. Whatever you do to your gut, you do to your brain. Whatever you do to your brain, you do to your gut. And now, my 2021 subject matter, the gut to lung axis. The bidirectional crosstalk that occurs between the gut and the lung has been termed the gut-lung axis. Intestinal disturbances have observed in certain lung diseases, which have been shown to be mediated by the gut microbiota, and some probiotics, which have shown beneficial effects on lung health and the treatment of respiratory diseases. It stands to reason that a deeper understanding of the gut microbiome and its role in respiratory disorders will aid in the design and development of improved treatment for lung disorders. The gut and lung microflora are clearly linked by nutrition, the immune system, and digestive and respiratory health through mutual communication linking this intricate axis. The lung microbiome found in the lower respiratory tract is a collection of microorganisms, particularly found on the mucus layer of the epithelial surfaces. This emerging and exciting field of investigation is leading to new ways of thinking about the lung and its disorders. So let's take a look at the lung or the gut-lung communication. It communicates through the oral pharynx via environmental products and bacteria. In the blood, bacterial fragments and short-chain fatty acids of note butyrate and immune cells. And the nerve, it should speak to many of the manual therapists. Signals from the gut to the brain via vagal afferent innervation. Vagus nerve, cranial nerve number 10, starts from the medulla oblongata in the brainstem, goes down to the transverse colon and innervates 80 to 90% afferently everything between its travels. Take a good look at this picture. And what you're seeing is something that's very interesting. On the left, you see a normal oral microbiome and a normal gut microbiome. You'll have a normal lung microbiome. However, when you have translocation of bacteria or bad bacteria, possibly from oral, most definitely from the gut, you'll have pulmonary dysbiosis leading you down a path of ARDS. So the gut is strongly implicated with the health of the lung. And like I said, gut to lung is my new thing. It's my ad from the gut to the brain. In addition, population-based gut microbiome associated with hypertension, drugs, food, and lifestyle damage the gut microbiota, which is shown to have an increase in blood pressure. And you can do that very simply in the office with your clear blood pressure monitoring. Here is a study to back up just what I said before. The study had 41 patients who had ideal blood pressure. 99 patients had hypertension. 56 patients had prehypertension. The conclusion was patients with pre or hypertension had a reduction in bacterial diversity. Phase 2 of that study, the scientists transplanted fecal matter from patients into germ-free mice. The mice that received fecal matter from hypertensive patients also developed hypertension. It's all about the gut. Another study, researchers transplanted feces from mice without hypertension to mice with hypertension. They then saw a reduction in blood pressure in the mice with hypertension. You know, so much about these, if you will, fecal transplants. I'm still hoping that Michael Jordan will give me a fecal transplant because I always wanted to play basketball at a level like that. But the point remains that your gut bacteria really determines a lot because of its strong signaling and signaling throughout the body. Short-chain fatty acids are a direct link from the gut to hypertension. Dietary fibers, gut bacteria can produce short-chain fatty acids. Bacteria populations, patients with higher blood pressure had lower levels of species that produce short-chain fatty acids. My Super 7R action plan. We are at 4:03. We are going to go take a few more minutes. I'm going to answer every question. I'm in no rush, so hold up. We're almost there. The Super 7R action plan, this is what I do with my patients. Number one, I'll do it in an epigrammatic, concise fashion. I will reset their diet. I'll take them off the sugars, the gluten, the dairy. I'll try and individualize the diet for them, change their lifestyle, try and let them know that exercise, meditation, good quality food is not a jail term and it's not a diet, even though we use the word. It is a lifestyle. Change their mindset. Health is wealth. You have nothing if you don't have your health. After I reset that, and I do individualize it for them, it's not for this seminar, but an upcoming seminar, we will talk about genetics and genetic testing to allow for optimizing people's outcomes. Number two, remove. Remove with unwanted pathogens, oregano oils, berberine, garlic. Change how they eat. Detoxification on a full plan. Remove unwanted pathogens, bacteria, viruses, etc. Replace. Replace with digestive enzymes and stomach acids. Then you want to regenerate, repair, heal and seal the damaged intestinal mucosa. Then you want to reinoculate. Reinoculate with both pre and probiotics. We've talked about that a little earlier. The prebiotics are the food. If you don't feed the probiotics, they're going to turn around and eat your epithelial cell too. You want them to be populated and fed well. Then you want to reintroduce certain foods. Those food sensitivities, just after you fix your gut, you probably are not going to be as sensitive to all those foods. So having said that, you should add certain foods back either through retesting or what we call a modified elimination diet and add it in. So after 2 or 3 days, they see if they can get any symptomology from the food. If they don't, continue with the food. And ultimately, you want to retain your health and your GI integrity. So that's a long process. A lot of people who, a lot of people who are listening may not do the gut. There are others who I'm sure are experts in the gut. So let me give you my Dr. Rob's 1-month DaVinci gut protocol. Let's talk about GI benefits. GI benefits very simply encourages GI comfort, strengthens and repairs the intestinal lining, balances the immune system in the gut, promotes better bathroom habits, and supports heavy levels of beneficial bacteria. It's got some key components like L-glutamine, the most abundant amino acid in the body, which also allows for mucosal lining. It's got L-carnosine or zinc carnosine. Zinc carnosine is critical for tight junction. It has a very low calories and very low carbohydrates, which are also critical. It's got specific aloe vera, DGL, slippery elm, and marshmallow to help heal the gut lining. In addition, I put back in that Mega Probiotic ND. That Mega Probiotic ND has 9 different species of dairy-free probiotics, over 50 billion colony-forming units. It's a full spectrum to populate the upper and lower intestinal tract. Something new is enzyme benefits. As we all know, enzymes are protein-based compounds and function as catalysts to initiate and regulate the biochemical process necessary for life. Enzymes operate with substrates specifically, meaning they will only catalyze a reaction with specific compound or a group of compounds. For example, the proteases will only catalyze the breakdown of proteins and will not react with carbohydrates or fats. The need for enzymes are exacerbated typically with altered digestive function in the upper digestive tract. When stomach acid is altered, there's a downstream effect on enzyme secretion from the pancreas. This creates a need for supplemental enzymes to facilitate proper breakdown, absorption, and assimilation of nutrients. And fourth, believe it or not, a new hot product, and the name says amyloid, so it's about amyloid plaquing, amyloid benefits. If you don't fix the gut, you can't fix the brain. If you don't fix the brain, you can't fix the gut. So all my gut protocols have brain in it. All my brain protocols have gut in it. So amyloid benefits is a supplement designed to help support a healthy inflammatory response and to limit the formation of amyloid plaques and tau tangles in the brain. Some of the ingredients are colostrum, which is a key ingredient in this amyloid benefit formula. Colostrum is an excellent source of PRP complexes. These signaling proteins are essential for moderating the cytokines and control the immune response and support a healthy inflammatory response. In addition, the formula also includes curcumin, ashwagandha, pomegranate extract, and palm fruit bioactive complexes, all pointing at helping brain health. Here's a very nice and tight GI benefits: 1 scoop twice a day, mega probiotic ND50, 1 cap daily, enzyme benefits 1 cap per meal, and amyloid benefits 3 caps daily. Before we get to questions, everybody please keep an eye out. My new book's coming out in October, The Superhighway to Health, 7 Steps to Optimizing the Gut-Brain Connection. Always love to end with a quote: take care of your body, as my favorite Jim Rohn once said. It's the only place you have to live. And if you guys need to get in contact with me, Facebook, follow me on Facebook. I'm there. I'm putting out information. Dr. Robert Silverman. Anybody interested in laser, there's your Laser Mastermind Facebook group, and there's my website. And I am going to take it back up and open it up for any kind of questions. And I'm actually going to open up my webcam. Hey, everybody. Did you want to read the questions, or do we want me to go through these? Let's see what we have.
Yeah, it's up to you. It's on the side there if you'd like to look through them and read them out, or I can help.
Why don't you help me, because they're just not coming up.
So,
hi, everybody. How do you like the COVID hairdo?
One of the first questions is from Stephen, and he says, many patients are taking CBD. It would seem like this is beneficial since it shows anti-inflammatory properties. Do you recommend this phytocannabinoid therapy? I might have said that wrong.
No, you said it. It's great.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with it. It is positive. There's a lot of talk about it being very positive, especially for brain health, and there's some immune functions. You know, I'm only given up to 75 minutes. We kind of stretch it to 75, so it's hard to cover everything. So I try to pick what I called the best ones I could in that time period, and that's what you saw. I have no problem with CBD.
Okay, and we have 2 from Danielle. It looks like. First, where would you recommend for the best place to find studies or clinical data and evidence for natural supplements, vitamins, and minerals?
You know what? My understanding is that right now, Fullscript, which is obviously what you're on, is going to have an educational library. And I think Cameron Moores can comment on that. If not, you're always welcome to reach out. If you reach out to me, I'll share everything that I get, and I'm reading every day.
Yes, actually, I can also recommend it's our new knowledge center. So it's fullscript.com/blog, and we have a ton of educational articles there, ingredient library, protocols, webinars. So you can find a lot there. I can link it in the chat as well. Second from Danielle says, has there been any studies done or being done on using NAC in COVID-19?
Yeah, we touched upon it. That one was glutathione, NAC, ton of literature on respiratory, upper respiratory, producing glutathione. Great choice. Been going through it like wildfire.
Vicky says, when should patients be taking this immune support, and for how long? Only if they become ill or exposed, and continuously for months until this is all over.
Well, I think you're talking about I had 3 protocols: the gut protocol, which is good for anybody at any time, and the other ones that we were talking about, I think it was immune support. You know, right now, immunity is at the top of everybody's mind, and I'm taking extra stuff because, again, I'm in New York, but it's very clear that one of the things that we caught with was our immune systems were down, and Americans especially not healthy, and North Americans for that matter. So I would put them on some form of that and offer it to your patients. Once I offered to them, they all jumped to it. Remember, there's no other option right now. I mean, don't kill me. There's no vaccine. There's no drug. You know, the only thing that we have, and the only thing we really should always talk about, you know, in the functional medicine world, is the lifestyle and the supplementation.
All right, Noreen, there's evidence to suggest that Sambucus or elderberry increases IL-6, so this may contribute to the intensity of a cytokine storm. Should it only be used as preventative, if at all?
Right, I know there was one article that came out and that baby's been kind of put to bed. So that was very early and very initial when this all came out. It was one article. So I wouldn't lose any sleep over the one article. A lot of the doctors jumped on. I know who it was. He's pretty famous. It came out of his institute, and essentially that's been put to bed. So don't concern yourself with the elderberry as far as being, you know, detrimental. The literature is very stellar.
Vicky says, and how did they get those results about the estrogens and testosterone levels? Did they just draw a random blood test on patients with COVID-19?
It was blood.
Blood. John says, are there any specific probiotics and prebiotics that you would recommend to strengthen the gut-lung connection, help asthma patients?
Sure. The mega that we talked about is the one that I would recommend, 52.5 billion with 9 different strains, non-dairy. So the gut to lung gets positively affected by the gut. So that's the one that I recommended twice, actually, but mostly in the gut lung or gut protocol.
Heather said that you briefly said eliminate or oregano oil. Can you elaborate on that? Or you may have heard.
Well, oregano oil would help with respiratory or upper GI. So I wouldn't say eliminate it. Oregano oil or emulsified oregano oil, if you will, would help decrease pathogens in the upper GI. Sorry,
right.
That was a clarification.
Okay. Julie says, how do you modify immune support if patient has an autoimmune condition?
It's a great question. So obviously, you know, that is a comorbidity. So again, and I have a lot of patients with autoimmunity, so they're coming in, they're very protected right now, masks and all that. It's always going and changing their lifestyle, changing what's coming in their mouth, and fixing their gut.
All right, just a couple more. It looks like Maria says, or asks, are we worried about drug interactions with the supplements recommended?
Really good question, and we can always double check that online, but usually what I recommend, there were 18 products. I made sure that I went through the ingredients and the more commonly used drugs, but always check that before you make a recommendation.
And Pamela asked, the connection between the gut and liver seems obvious. How does the gut brain and the gut lung axis interact? Thank you.
That's a great question. So it interacts through a multitude of ways. There's obviously blood. And in that picture really depicted it oropharyngeal. It was bacteria and blood, but the big guy, vagus nerve.
And you know what, actually the last one is about having access to your slides and the recording. So I can just, you know, reiterate that we will be sending a recording and hopefully access to the slides to all registrants. So you will be able to access that. We also host it on that Knowledge Center I've posted, so you can always go back there.
Yep, so, sounds good to me.
So yeah, a lot of thank yous, a lot of great questions, and we will be sending the recording to everyone as soon as possible.
Thanks for sticking with me. I saw everybody stayed on. Thanks for giving me an extra 15 minutes. And anything you need, let me know. Good luck with the protocols. Take care, everybody. Have a good one.